Hello and welcome to another edition of Maximum Growth Live. I'm one of your hosts, Jay Ruane, CEO of FirmFlex, your social media marketing agency for lawyers, as well as managing partner of Ruane Attorneys, a civil rights and criminal defense firm here in Connecticut. With me, as always, the grand poobah of Price Benowitz, your DC, Maryland, Virginia, and South Carolina lawyer, Mr. Seth Price, as well as the founder of Blue Shark Digital, SEO for law firms, including this guy. I signed up yesterday, folks, and that's actually one of the things. Well, first of all, let's start. How's your week going, Seth?
It's going well. I just got back from the CRISP conference, and that was a sight to behold. Michael Mogul did himself proud. It was unlike anything we've seen in the legal space. He brought in keynote speakers that blew anything we've ever seen in the industry before. To be, to be feet away from Gary Vee and just get his insights. Malcolm Gladwell. They had, the founder of Giftology. I mean, it was really high level thought leadership, big picture, energy driving in a way. I thought AVO was heading in that direction as far as a conference in the legal space that was beyond either, CLE and business, but to bring you to another level and perspective. And Mogul's done a great job of putting energy and perspective in a room in a way we hadn't seen before.
Yeah, I wasn't fortunate enough to be able to make it, but I must have had 100 friends like you in the room. And one of the things that I really took away from the CRISP Game Changer Summit is that Mike, as and CRISP as an organization has really sort of lit a spark inside a lot of lawyers. Because I think a lot of us get out of law school. And we do suffer from imposter syndrome to some extent. We are hesitant because there isn't traditional, business operational training in law school. And one of the great things about that whole operation is that, they're telling you you can do it. And by hearing it enough and seeing people around you who are also doing it, it gets inspiring. And you feel like you can accomplish something. I would actually even sort of suggest that perhaps it's a little bit like the sense of community you get at like a Max LawCon. Max LawCon is different from CRISP Game Chambers. You show up to the CRISP, it's you. Maybe you bring one or two people with you from your team, and you're meeting other people that are doing the same things that you are doing, and you come out fired up, right? And with Maximum Lawyer, you go to that, and you come out with this sort of, hey, I've got a community of people around me that are doing it. It's a little different flavor that you get out of it. And I think as a 1-2 punch, the Chris stuff is really good because, you're talking about some of the best motivational speakers out there. The only other person I think that he could put on the dais put on the stage would be someone like Tony Robbins. Because
agreed, and it wouldn't surprise me. He's hosting his next summit at the Ben Stadium right next door, and
that blows my mind. That's got to be $1 million to rent that.
Yeah, he is doing stuff which I love. In fact, one of our former guests, Peter Shankman, he had a book like, yeah, we can do that. Where he's like, yeah, you know what? He got 100 CEOs during the .com bubble to all go on a parachute, on a jump with him. Like when you set your mind to something, and I think that watching what he has done as far as saying, hey, this is how conferences are done in the past. Yeah, that's great. But I see a vision and I'm going to execute on it has been just a remarkable thing to watch and just admire as far as that run.
Yeah, it's interesting. And this is something that I think we've talked about in prior shows is that, for the most part, many people in our audience, including you and I, really started our firms undercapitalized. And we were undercapitalized in that it was like a cell phone, a pen, a legal pad, and some hustle, right? And that's really where we do. Nobody would think to open a restaurant, with one person being the chef, the maitre d', the busboy, the bookkeeper. I mean, you just
I think you'd be shocked. I think a lot of people do, and they probably follow our small firm model, which is why like 80% of restaurants don't make it their first
right.
year.
Yeah, but yeah,
It's
yeah,
but the
well,
ones that
exactly.
do, and you see the ones that are making it are the restaurant groups, and why do you need a franchise to sell a burrito? Why can't you have your own amazing burrito or own amazing cup of coffee? And you see, well, yeah, but it is not just the love of cooking to make a great entree, but it's a business to make money. And if you don't have the systems set up, I wonder if there's somebody in the space who could talk to that.
That'd
Uh,
be interesting.
Smile, wink, wink. That it is the fact that it is an operation with a process, and just it was fascinating to see. This was less systems oriented and more, inspiration. You can do it. Create if you build it, they will come, and you need to know what you're building.
Yeah, and that's really interesting to me from an outsider's perspective. I've never done the crisp videos. I'm sure they have a system for putting them together. You can go back on their YouTube page and see what they're putting out, and it's quality stuff. Some people will call it formulaic, but there's a formula for a reason. That's what resonates with people, and so I wouldn't necessarily say it's a bad thing to follow the formula for videos. I mean, movies across the country, TV shows, they all follow a formula because that's
Every
how.
sitcom you've ever seen, they have the whole. Every movie you've ever seen
Yeah.
has the. So anyway, to me, it was to see them grow from essentially a high-end video group for lawyers into market leadership in the sense of drive, determination, and yes, you can do it was quite extraordinary.
And that brings me up to the point I want to make about Chris. I wonder, and maybe I know we've had him on the show before. Maybe it's time to bring him back as sort of a post event breakdown. I wonder when that transition happened for him. If he got into the space thinking, "Oh, I'm just going to be a video guy," and then something internally clicked when he started doing things like traction. Because I think he's a big proponent of EOS and that type of thing. And I know he's in a bunch of masterminds himself to propel his business forward. And I wonder where that sort of switch happened, where he said, I'm not just going to be the video guy. I'm going to take this to the next level. And I think there's some corollaries to many of the people in our audience who sit around and they've got a fledgling PI practice or a trust and estates practice, and they say, you know what, I'm going to go all in on this and really build this into something. There needs to be that sort of switch, that thing that happens that sort of takes you to the next level. His is interesting because he went from a commodity, right? A commodity of doing videos for people. They still do it. They do a good job. To really sort of taking people out of the commodity and giving them something that you really can't commoditize. There's nobody to compete with him in this space for lawyers at this point, and that's really sort of genius. And I wonder how you can apply that to your own practice, where yes, you do the initial service of helping people fill out their visas or probate an estate or get divorced. But how do you take yours to the next level where there is no competition for what you do because you are wholly unique? I don't know
No,
the
it's
answer to that question.
you look at Gary Vee and how he's reinvented himself from the wine guy opening bottles of wine on YouTube early days to the social media mogul now into crypto and beyond. It's just fascinating how when you see people that driven in action is just remarkable.
Okay, so you bring him up, and I'm going to take a counterpoint position. I think Gary Vee is a fraud, and I'm going to say that. And I was a big Gary Vee person for the longest time because I did find him inspirational. But like I talked about, a lot of us started our firms with, a pen and a notepad and a cell phone. Gary Vee's father owned $1 million wine store. He had already set up the credit card processing, the vendors to deliver him wine. He had relationships. Now, I'm not saying taking it from 1 million to 5 million isn't difficult, isn't a challenge, isn't something to be respected. but it is a lot different going from $0 to $1 million a year than it is from 1 million to 5 million, because you have revenue that you can use to do things. You have a rep in the community. You have the ability to reach out to vineyards and say it. And so he said, "Hey, look, there are tools that no one else in the industry is using, and I'm going to use those. I'm going to use them creatively and get in front of people." But Gary Vee talks about how he built himself from nothing. It's part of his myth, right? But he didn't. He built
Well,
himself from an existing million
because the
dollar
truth is
operation.
somewhere, dude, somewhere in the truth. Look, you see lawyers, those lawyers that are second generation have a huge advantage over those that
Right.
start first
But you don't
generation.
see John
You,
Morgan's son saying, "I built myself from nothing." No, he says, "I had a
no,
great foundation and I'm taking us to the next level." You know, where
agreed.
Gary Vee's whole myth is, "I
Well,
did it
but
from nothing."
$1 million firm, and granted, a million then was really not nothing. But the fact was, it was a retail store with hustle and X margins, and he took it to a different stratosphere. So yes,
Well,
he does not give enough credit for, but I think you're giving him too much of a hard time. That he was the guy that said, "Let's slice the bread." Plenty of people opened a liquor store where they sold stuff on a corner where you had your real estate of a 10-block area, sold your wine, but he was the only person who said, "Hey, this new technology coming out, this is going to be a game changer,
I,
and we're going to leverage it." So I think you're giving him a hard
I
time.
agree with that. I agree with that. But he talks about how I didn't take a paycheck in the first 18 months so I could build my business. Yeah, because he was living with mom and dad who had food in the refrigerator, a warm house, roof over
But a
his
lot of
head
people could do. You
that
could
was
have
being
done that.
paid for
Look,
by the wine store.
but
So
I
he's
stop.
lying to people.
So what you're no, he's basically saying you can't come from abject poverty to it. Maybe meaning, but most people have a couch they can stay on that they can bootstrap if you need to keep expenses low during this. Yes, an advantage, but it's not like it's monumental. He has done something to the point where he will eventually buy your beloved jets with some sort of a group in a way that you can't really say, "Oh yeah, he started as a non-paid employee of his dad's liquor store." Like, to me, you're taking away credit where credit is really due.
I'm willing to give him credit. What I'm saying is he has a mythology that he is promoting that doesn't necessarily match the facts.
Well, I think what I love about him is that he goes out and as a hobby shows the hustle. So if you don't have that and you need cash, he's like personally going to yard sales. And I'm sure it's like any reality show, it's not as easy as it looks and there are mistakes. But he is demonstrating that if you want to make something from nothing and get to that first level before you could do it, he's actually gone back and help people say, "You know what? If you got nothing, this is how you could get something. Do you need something? Do you need a little bit of money to go to the yard sale with gas and with money to buy?" Yeah, like there's always some minor capitalization, friends and family, etc. But what I love about him is he is showing you, you know what? If you don't have the father with that money, you could get enough money to propel this on your own.
I absolutely give him credit for that. Absolutely. And one of the things about him is that he is constantly hustling. I am not going to take that away from him. I will respect that he never gives up the hustle. He's always about making relationships. If you watch any of his products, anything things that he produces online, you listen to him on anything, he is a relationship maker. And he is always thinking about different ways to take things. And I think that's unique in his
And,
mind is that he's constantly saying, "What if we do this? What if we do this?" And he's not beholden to, "Well, that's not the way it's done," because he comes at it from a, "Well, why? Like, what do you mean that's not the way it's done? Who says it's not done? Things are changing. We can change them." And I like
and
that
some
about him.
people, do you agree? Who cares if you agree or disagree with, like, you shouldn't go to college? It all depends, right? But the fact is, he's making you think. Is this definitive? Is the path of $250,000 of debt for the average person a good thing, or is there a way that you can leverage that and get further in life? So you're saying, hey, again, I'm not saying not to go to college. What I'm saying is, there's a decision: 4 years and $240,000 in debt. You could do a lot of damage.
Oh
And
yeah.
so what he's saying is, again, I'm not making a value judgment on that, but he's making you think outside the box, and I love that. I want to pivot for a minute. We started early on this year, this calendar year, discussing what could be done. We thought when COVID happened, hey, we'll be outsourcing to Alabama and Pensacola like some of our guests have done, right? Some of the great
Hmm.
law firms in the US have great operations there. But we saw opportunities overseas. How is that going for you? And how is the international workforce merging with Ruane attorneys?
So it's really interesting, and in fact, if you go back in our timeline of Max Growth Live, it is 1 year to the day where we first brought up, "Hey, I'm thinking about going VA," and so
A
we
term
got
I hate because I would like to say
yeah,
going international.
overseas talent, um, and it's interesting because um, we've had this week we had a little bit of a culture issue that was easily remedied, and it was how a person overseas writes dates versus how an American write dates, and there was some conflict in calendaring because, as many people know, overseas people, pretty much the rest of the world besides Americans, will write day, month, year, but Americans write month, day, year. And there was a lot of conflict, unnecessary conflict, but it was conflict nonetheless because some of the American side talent was getting confused, and the overseas talent was saying, I don't understand what the problem is. This is how you write a date. So we remedied it by saying, hey, going forward, you can do it either way you want, but write out the name of the month. So it could be 9 November or it could be November 9th, but always have
Of all the things I've heard out of Jay Ruane's mouth, I don't get that one.
well, we're
Like,
going to
why?
solve it in a different way.
Because there are going to be numbers at some point, and if there is not a rule of Ruane, a system, to me, let's not do what you want. It's we are going with this, and while you work here, this is how we do it.
So that's what we're doing. We're actually reprogramming our CRM so that we have it in the next 10 days until that can get done, so that everything gets forced automatically.
I'll
That's
give
right.
you 10 days, but the Ruane way is there is one way to
There's
do it,
one way.
and it is not whichever you want.
Absolutely. And the other thing that's been of interesting is that some of the American side talent thought that their role, and it's probably a failure on my part, was to basically look for mistakes in the overseas talent's work and
Seen
call
that
it out.
before.
And I said, no, no, no. They've been trained. They know what they're doing. If they make a mistake, they're going to be responsible for the mistake, not you guys. And
Well,
so I think that is the that's been resolved. But it's been interesting because we are firmly in the system of using overseas talent. We're starting to recruit directly. Eventually, I've got my aunt down in El Salvador. Who wants to meet me up with some people? She's a missionary. She's 83, but you'd think she was, 50 with all of her energy. She got more energy than I do. But so we're getting there, and I think it's the new normal, right? We talked about a lot the new
and
normal during COVID.
I,
Our new system involves overseas talent and will forevermore.
so I have, similarly, we talked, let's say a year ago, we launched in January. By February, I think our first hires were in place. And I was looking intently at intake, partially because I looked at my intake and said, whoa, I'm paying a premium for bilingual people in DC in a button seat, probably 60 grand plus, 65 with taxes and benefits and everything. If I'm being honest with myself, it could be a low number at the end of the day. And I was like, this is insane. And we made a huge push that I thought was going to be more R&D. I expected we'd get two or three, we'd make mistakes, we'd go back. Thankfully, and I'm knocking on some wood here, we now have 11 people on our intake team and from overseas alone. And we had a life moment. We got caught in a way in the history of the firm we haven't. I take a very careful count of who we lose that we don't want to lose. There's a certain amount of attrition, and thankfully, much of what we lose is our bottom 10, 20%. They're looking to game somebody else. They've realized their run is over. We've had a pretty good run of not losing people we don't want to lose. And we had a run in the last 6 to 9 months where as we talked about on here, I lost the drama during COVID as far as people, conflicting in the office, but I also lost the esprit de corps and that culture piece. And while I tried to put it and have the best manager of that team I've had in probably 5-6 years, we lost 4 people we didn't want to lose, varying from B's to A's. And it was really painful. And but for this decision and the push I got from doing the show with you, we would have been in terrible shape. Instead, it was like a little bit of a squeeze with too much dependence overseas. But it was a moment in life where the economy and inflation that's hitting DC in particular, I'm sure many markets around the country, that what used to be an acceptable first-year salary out of college, 35 to 45, is no longer the case. And that in our market, 50 is becoming a number that if you're not hitting it, the person is really not going to be staying there more than a couple of months. It was serendipitous, and I was very, very thankful, because had we not done that, we would have been in terrible shape with our intake team. And that instead, we've built, grown, made some mistakes, adjusted, but the domestic labor market changed so dramatically. And while I've spoken to other people where different departments have lost people, we've had this confluence in intake that was really, and I say that to anybody who's relying on the recent college grad. If it hasn't hit your market, it probably will be. That the delta, and we talk a lot about when our debate between first year versus third year hires for lawyers, and that do you get people to, I feel like I'm seeing this on a accelerated piece, that if you bring people in and you can't find a track to 50, 60,000 for recent college grads in our market, adjust for your own, that we're losing people in a way we never did before. 60 was always a manager or like a mid-level junior manager, and that now that's what's expected from strong candidates right out of college.
Yeah, that's just mind blowing. And I want to talk to you a little bit about staffing, but first, why don't we take a break? We'll hear from our sponsors, and when we come back, I want to talk to you about the idea of either overstaffing or understaffing. I think I know where you're going to land on this spectrum, but let's take our quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about staffing as we wrap up this edition of Maximum Growth Live. Hi, I'm Jay from FirmFlex, and I want to let you in on a foolproof way to drive viable clients to your door via social media, using a social funnel. You see, social media is a different type of marketing, and using the wrong methods won't land you clients. It will turn people off to your brand. But there's a way to get those clients to opt in, learn more about you, learn why you are great, and then want to contact you, whether you handle trust and estates, or family law, or personal injury, or any other type of law. And that's using a multiple-stepped funnel that delivers the right message at the right time. You can get that message with a FirmFlex social funnel. A FirmFlex social funnel is the way to drive qualified leads into your client base. Our funnel program gives you the ultimate control over your new client funnel. We design, implement, and set up all the triggers for a multi-step funnel, bringing attention to your brand and slowly warming potential clients from cold to red hot and ready to engage. And the best part is, you can start the whole process right online. Visit getfirmflex.com today.
In this world today, if you want to grow your business, you want to grow your firm, you want to take on more cases and make a bigger impact, you have to have a digital blueprint. Statistically, throughout the time that we've been working with Blue Shark Digital, our law firm, the Atlanta Divorce Law Group, grew over 1,400%. They truly understand where we're headed and how we want to get there. I have a team in Blue Shark Digital that I feel like has my back.
And we're back with Maximum Growth Live. And Seth, I want to talk to you a little bit about, we talked earlier in the show, right? A little bit about how a lot of law firms start out undercapitalized. And what I am learning for the most part, and this brings up something that, a topic that Ryan McKean brought up in Maximum Lawyer this week, is the question of staffing. And there was he posted a question about, have you ever really hired a utility player in the terms of the person who could play, third base, shortstop, outfield, designated hitter, maybe even get behind the plate.
If Bernard Norberg is listening, it's Fred Stanley of the Yankees. It was the guy who could go anywhere.
Right, exactly. I'm a little younger, so I'm talking Luis Sojo in the '98 team. Who basically he play every position, modestly. But anyway, so and there was a lot of chatter online about how, well, I want my receptionist and my intake people to be cross-trained, and that's not what he was asking about. I think there was some missing there. He literally wants somebody whose job is, you don't have a job. Your job is everybody, and pitch in on trial prep as necessary, pitch in here. But you don't come in and say you're part of the intake team. You are part of the utility team. Have you staffed that position?
I'm torn. We had that when we started our firm. There was a guy, and he literally had a business card, I think, at one point that said somebody, literally in quotes. I was going to post it. I didn't get a chance to put the post. But we had a somebody, and he bounced around exactly as you're talking about. It's not ideal. It was good for the time. And as you're growing, before you have systems built out or as they're building, yes, I think that as you grow, it becomes a question of overstaffing versus understaffing, a bit of cross training, which is the next step. These are not incongruous. You go from a utility infielder, hopefully outgrow that and have some cross training just to make sure that you're covered. But that, I think, is a step in growth, and that over time, you hopefully have enough bandwidth within a department, within a job area, that there may be somebody who has different areas, but you don't really want a utility person that's doing intake and accounting and paralegaling in a perfect world. That's not a good thing, but it may get you to the point where those teams are built out with enough redundancy that they can stand on their own.
Okay, so then what do you do with that person? Because if they've been able to touch intake, they started off doing intake, then they did some legal ops, and they did some paralegal because they got better.
Cool.
But now those teams have grown. But you saw this person who has a unique sense of knowledge of all different areas. Do you keep them as a special projects person?
Well, right. You have, yes, I'll give you my 2 cents. One, they could, in a perfect world, if they're strong enough, and very often they're not, grow into your firm administrator or some sort of ops person because they have all that knowledge. That's perfect. Sadly, my experience has been that very often that person will squeeze themselves out of a firm, that they have that, and that it's not the way it used to be. They were invaluable. And as they become less invaluable, they don't see a place there anymore. So my 2 cents is to either find something in ops that needs that general knowledge, or pick the area they like best and you need most and let them become a specialist in one area over time. But my experience has been that person generally will not make it to the promised land, that they help you. And not that you want to see them go. I wish that you could find a home in either as a specialist in one area and or an ops person that becomes like a junior firm administrator when you're first building and growing. But I have found often that person ends up finding their way out because it is not going to be the same as you grow, because that person will have less need. I mean, speaking of Ryan McKean, he may have 18 people growing to 30. What he needs now is very different than when he has 30 fully staffed people. That role will not be as essential. And that while you're never going to push the person out, very often I think they're going to find their own way out, because unless they may love that diversity and that freneticness, that's not what's going to make you money. What's going to make you money is the J. Ruin systems, where you have a person that sits in that silo and makes you money.
It's interesting. I read an article about Elon Musk having an assistant, and she was his longtime assistant, handling his calendar and really involved in the day-to-day of everything. And she asked for a raise. He said, go away for 2 weeks. I'll figure out where you fit in the organization and what your raise should be. And she came back in 2 weeks. He goes, look, you've been an incredible generalist. But but I don't need you as my assistant anymore. I don't need one generalist. I need five individualists that focus on each thing, and so your role doesn't exist anymore. And there's, she did stay in the organization before she left. They found other things for her to do,
Well,
but
that's
but that's
exactly
but
my
that's
point, right? No, no,
right.
that I wish I'm not Musk and I don't have his almost trillions, although I heard it's down under a trillion. I'm very sorry for him today. But that's exactly it. He found we had this. So I hope this helps people. When we started the firm, we screwed around with a bunch of office assistants, right? Our everything. And when you say utility infielder, it wasn't a utility infielder. It was, they had to do everything. They were doing reception, some paralegaling, some accounts receivables, you name it. They were our firm. They weren't a firm because there was no firm, but they did everything, right? We burned through some people that were like from a real estate side, some paralegal, but this woman was freaking awesome. And two things: when she left, we kept firing people that replaced her because nobody could replace her. It turned out, as Musk said, she was five people. It took us 4 or 5 people to replace this. The firm had grown. Ironically, one of our partners, who is still with us 11 years later, ended up marrying her. So she stayed in the family, not working for us. She's too smart for that. Michigan honors law, and is going to someday be the president of NARAL. But it's exactly the Musk story. She did everything. She was leaving for law school, so it wasn't like we were the opposite. But when you have that everything, as you grow, that person becomes 4 or 5 people. And what I've seen right there, where like, of course, we would never fire her. We'd give her a job to do. But it's not the same job that she had. And very often it doesn't last because she was so invaluable and had such diversity of experience that if she just had to do paralegal work, she's way too qualified to do that. But we kept her because as a startup, she got to flex her intellect in so many different areas. It kept her around. It wouldn't had we picked one for her to sit in alone.
And that really becomes a challenge for people like you or I who build our business based on relationships, because you develop this really deep relationship with somebody for years, and then all of a sudden they really don't have a role in the organization that they helped build. And so it can breed resentment. It can, that type of thing. It's a very delicate thing.
But the KIPP charter schools that I've been a booster of and the board chair in Maryland for 10 years, I saw that the people that were there from the early days, it was how do they fit in? They were essentially a co-founder. And then all of a sudden, they're no longer, the organization grows and they need to find a place within it. Sometimes they reinvent themselves. In one awesome case, they came back with a silo that they loved and had a great run at that. But it's definitely, as organizations build and grow, that is definitely a super challenge.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, we've babbled on a lot. We've had a lot of good shows lately with no guests, where it's just us talking about a lot of different topics. And it's
I'd
really
like
sort
to
of interesting.
conclude. I got this concluding topic, which because it's
Oh,
been
yeah, that's
followed
right.
on the show for a long
Yeah,
time.
let's talk about it because I think it kind of dovetails. Yeah, I missed my list here. Go for it.
So look, basically, like those that have been following the show for a while, we had this awesome firm administrator that had a catastrophic but non-fatal accident, and we essentially lost our everything, our rock. And it has been a long and tumultuous road. Not only did we end up promoting somebody from within who was had their issues and then ended up with Me Too issues and had to make a pivot very, very quickly, like in 15 minutes, to finally have a new firm administrator / ops HR person. And it's a weird life moment because, we talk about all of this. This is sort of the graduation, right? So you build up, you now have your silos and your teams. And then unless you have a deep enough bench, which is part dovetails of the story we were just talking about, bringing somebody on from the outside, it's scary.
Sure.
You can screen, you can hire, you bring that person in, but they may be incredibly talented in figuring out how to work within your space, letting them the flexibility to make certain mistakes and take a shot based on their sensibilities, wanting to make sure you don't lose your own. But this has been sort of a trippy experience where we went from utility infielder to building out the departments to having firm operations. But then, what is to keep something as an ongoing entity, it has to be bigger than you. And, bringing in somebody in leadership, real interesting and challenging times.
So how are you measuring this new firm administrator? Do you have key performance indicators because they really have their hands on a lot of things? But is it going to be like, what's your turnover? Because that's something that they could be measured against.
Right. So the first thing, I'm now in the sort of cleanup mess. First 2 weeks, just get to know the players, who the people are. This person's been a rock star and has jumped in and solved problems already, dealt with certain, raise issues, a certain, somebody wanting to leave. Can we turn them into a contractor issue? Done a great job with all of that. But great question, because right now, my first goal is 2 weeks. The second goal is 8 weeks, where they're sort of become, in 8 weeks, you've been at the job, you know what's going on. And my feeling is I need to get sort of stability of the game of whack-a-mole that we all play before I can start to move to this place. The great news is her sensibility is, yes, we saw that 4-person turnover in a department. We know something's wrong. What is it? Let's figure it out. But it's kind of hard to judge somebody on something when they're walking into an existing situation, which they're not going to be able to snap their fingers. You
Right.
inherit the team you have, and the question is, how can you tweak it rather than, okay, it's hard to have greater turnover when the people have already gone. Yes, the new people could leave, but it'll be a different issue. And the question is, can we be proactive rather than reactive? And figuring out, I'll look to you and maybe thoughts from people in the audience. How do you start to look proactively and measuring key performance indicators? Clearly a challenging piece.
Yeah, it's interesting, and the thing that I think is exciting for you is, you talk about that 8 week sort of onboarding period. That's going to bring you right up to the beginning of the new year. So in essence, you could be looking down, starting 2022, really with those ducks in a row and somebody responsible for it, which as a lot of us aim to do, get free to be able to sort of think of new ideas and run with it, which is really sort of exciting that you could, even after all we've been through over the last 3 years, it's really going to put you in a position where you really sort of have a lot more freedom than you've ever had before, which is exciting.
In a couple of years.
Yeah.
That's the dream. The dream is that you have somebody who can, and look, what I have seen, and it's been most clear at Blue Shark, I shouldn't be managing people. The impatience and ADHD is high enough that it's like, I can have the vision, but I really need other people to execute it, and giving them the wherewithal to do that is easier said than done, but something I definitely work at on a regular basis, because I've seen what's gone on at Blue Shark with growth and systems and culture, that I know that I would not be the best person, that David Brenton was the right guy at the right time to put this in place. I'm sure at some point he may, like right now, he connects as well with that community as possible. It's just been fascinating, and, very, very hopeful and optimistic that we're finding that here. But as we know, it's going to be continuing to support and build. I think that the piece that we didn't talk about today, what was kicked for the next show, is as we figure out whether it be domestic versus international labor, or whether it be overstaffing versus being okay with certain breakage when things happen, that each of those pieces will be part of that mosaic, and that you could have the best ops person in the world, but if you don't have the depth when somebody quits, you're going to have those holes. And how do you balance? Do you overstaff, for lack of a better word, versus allow stuff to be right at the right level, but knowing if one person leaves, you're in trouble. If 2 people leave, you're in deep doo-doo. And let's continue that conversation next week.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating concept, and I definitely think it's something that we have to flesh out a little bit more. But with that, folks, we're going to end this week's edition of Maximum Growth Live. As always, if you're interested in following us, you can check us out live every Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific, on our Facebook page, or we are syndicated across Maximum Lawyer Media. You can catch us on the Maximum Lawyer podcast, as well as live in John Fisher's group. And let's give respect to John Fisher, who's my guru when it comes to systems and his Power of a Systems book. Of course, if you want to follow Seth, you can keep up with him on the Blue Shark page. Check out his SEO Insider, which is a phenomenal series where he's interviewing some great people in the world of digital marketing. And I think it's something that everybody who is in the business of law, which is what we are in, should have a more familiarity with some of the topics in digital marketing, just so you can make sure that you're not getting screwed over by an unscrupulous vendor. And of course, if you like systems and love talking about systems, please join me in my Facebook group, Systemizing Your Law Firm for Growth. We're up over 600 members in less than a year. It's really growing by leaps and bounds, and I'm very proud of everything that we've been able to put out there. So that's going to do it for us here today on Maximum Growth Live. I am Jay Ruane. He is Seth Price. Seth, any parting words?
No, just have a great week, and we'll see you back next week.
Absolutely. And folks, we want to take special top opportunity right now to thank all of our veterans here on Veterans Day for everything that you've done for us, protecting our freedoms. We want to thank you from the bottom of Seth's heart, from my heart. We appreciate everything that you have done in helping us have the lives that we want. I know there's plenty of veterans in our community: Will Norman, Tyson Mutrix, Vince Tucci, tons of guys out there that are veterans, that are part of our extended communities. And we just want to say thank you, each and every one of you, for giving us the life that we wanted by your service. So thank you so much. That's going to do it for us now, folks. Bye for now.